Hello everyone, welcome to the channel, and in this video I'm going to be talking about everything canon in the Walking Dead comic universe, and I will do a part 2 after this talking about everything canon in the TV universe. And I'm going to try to include everything. I've done videos like this before, however they have become pretty outdated as I was forgetting some things, and a game that was in the comic universe called Overkill's The Walking Dead was cancelled before the console ports came out and was, in my opinion, like removed from canon. So I'm going to talk about everything in the comic universe, and I will try to stay as spoiler free as possible. Now, the idea for this video came from Primatrix 1986, who did a video like this on, I think, just the comic universe, but again, I don't think he did one on the TV universe, so I want to do one on the TV universe. And if I'm doing the TV universe, I might as well do the comic universe. And because, you know, it's been so long since he did his video and it's been so long since I did my videos, there is new stuff to talk about. So again, I'm going to try to stay as spoiler free as possible, and without further ado, let's begin. One quick thing I want to add is that I will be telling you when all of these came out, like which year all of these came out, and I will try to tell you where they fit in the overall story of the universe. So now that that's said, we can finally start. The first thing I want to talk about is the Walking Dead comic book series. It started in 2003 and ended in 2019. It had a total of 193 issues, and the story follows Rick Grimes, a police officer who was shot before the apocalypse, went into a coma, and awoke in the apocalypse, and now he has to deal with the new world he's in, a world filled with zombies and other survivors, both good and bad. Next up is the Walking Dead one-shots. Now, the one-shots tell short little stories in the world of the comic universe, and the first one they did was the Morgan special. The Morgan special takes place sometime after issue 1 and follows Morgan and Dwayne and shows what, you know, them surviving after the events of issue number 1. It came out in 2005 and was originally published in an Image Comics 2005 holiday special. I think that's what it was, and then it was later reprinted in issue 34. Now, the next special they did was the Michonne special. It came out in 2012 and takes place sometime before issue 19, which of course is where where Michonne first appears in the main comic storyline. The Michonne special gives us information like where she got her katana, which is her weapon of choice, and gives more information on her 2 walker pets that she kept around. The next special is the Governor special. It came out in 2013 and takes place in the middle of the Road to Woodbury novel, and I will get more into the novels later on, but this also takes place before issue 27, which is the Governor's first appearance in the comic book. Now, the Governor special explains why the Governor kept walkers' heads in fish tanks. Next up is the Tyrese special, which also came out in 2013 and takes place before issue 7, which is Tyrese's first appearance. Now, this storyline tells you how he got his weapon of choice, which was his hammer. Next up is The Walking Dead The Alien, which came out in 2016 and possibly takes place before issue number 1. Now, The Walking Dead The Alien is about a guy that was from America that has traveled to Barcelona, Spain, and he teams up with this woman named Claudia, who, like, she hears that apparently America has a handle on the walkers, so she wants to go with the American back to America so they can possibly get like a cure, and she can bring it back to her people in Barcelona, Spain. Now, the alien refers to the American character, not actual aliens, because this is a character that was from America, but now he's in a place he's not as familiar with, which is Spain, and he is seen as like the alien, the minority. Next up is Here's Negan, which is backstory on the character of Negan, of course one of the most popular characters in the book. and it takes place before issue 100, and it was released in 16 parts between the years of 2016 and 2017. It was originally published in Image Plus, and it was released in chapters of 4 pages a month, and tells the story of how Negan got his baseball bat Lucille, why he calls her that, and also shows him pre-apocalypse, pretty much all up until he forms his group of the Saviors. Now, I'm not going to say anything other than that because it might get a bit too spoilery if I talk about that. So yeah, something I always want to say is the Morgan special, Michonne special, Governor special, and Tyrese special are all 6 pages a piece. They are very short stories, and they were also all combined into one comic called the Free Comic Book Day special, which has all 4 of those specials in it. So if you're ever, wanting to read those stories, that's definitely a good comic to hunt down and get so you can read those storylines. They've also been reprinted other times, and yeah, so if you want to read those stories, they're pretty easy to find. Next up is the novels. Now, the first novel, Rise of the Governor, was released in 2011. It tells you the story of why the governor became the fucking lunatic he became, and I'll just leave it at that. Next up is a short story that is connected to the novels called Just Another Day at the Office. It was released in 2012 and was kind of like an epilogue to Rise of the Governor. From what I've heard, and I could be wrong, but I think the author of the novels, Jay Bonansinga, said that Just Another Day at the Office was actually the ending of Rise of the Governor, but because Robert Kirkman liked the idea of ending the novel with the big twist, they decided to take the Just Another Day at the Office, which was originally the final chapter, and they later released it in the Walking Dead official magazine as like a epilogue. So Just Another Day at the Office is like a bridge between the first novel and second novel, and basically tells you the story of why the people of Woodbury look up to the governor and why they see him as a savior. The next book, the second book, is called The Road to Woodbury. It also came out in 2012, but it actually came out before Just Another Day at the Office. So yeah, but it does take place after Just Another Day at the Office. The Road to Woodbury continues the story of the governor while also introducing the character of Lily Call, who plays a very important role in the comics, and I'm just going to leave it at that because if I say what her important role is, that gives away major spoilers. But because her character wasn't that fleshed out in the comics, the novels were there to flesh her character out more and basically show you all the information about her. Now again, this story shows her journey to Woodbury, and it also shows her first meeting with the governor. Next up is The Fall of the Governor Part 1, which was released in 2013, and The Fall of the Governor Part 2, which was released in 2014. This is where the novels become way more connected with the comic books. This is when they cross over, as The Fall of the Governor Part 1 tells the story of when Rick first met the governor, and The Fall of the Governor Part 2 shows the battle between Rick and the governor. But of course, these books are through the governor and Lily's point of view instead of Rick's, because if you want Rick's point of view, well, that's what the comics are for. So the next book came out in 2014 as well, and it was called The Walking Dead Descent. Now, this is where the novels focus on Lily and has her become the new leader of Woodbury, and in this storyline they introduce a character like a preacher who is batshit insane, and the next 2 novels are basically he is the main antagonist of them. So you could call this like the Preacher saga. So you have Descent, which again came out in 2014, and then the next novel, Invasion, which came out in 2015, concludes the story of the Preacher. Now, the next book came out in 2016, which Descent, if I didn't say, Descent came out in 2014, Invasion came out in 2015, and In Search and Destroy came out in 2016. In this storyline, there has been a bit of a time skip since the events of Invasion, and it's now about 4 years into the apocalypse. And in this story, we see that Woodbury has connected with other communities, and the kids of Woodbury were actually kidnapped and taken to some place inside of Atlanta. And so Lily and some of the other people of the communities try to find those kids and bring them home. Now, the next book came out in 2017 and was the final book in the Woodbury saga, as I like to call it, and it was called Return to Woodbury. In this book, after the events of Search and Destroy, Lily is trying to get back home to Woodbury, but there is another survivor that is getting in the way of that, and I will just leave it at that. Now, that was the last book J. Bonansinga has wrote. There has been one novel that was released in 2019, however it was written by someone else called Wesley Chu, and it was called The Walking Dead Typhoon. This is a story that takes place in China and is about this place called the Beacon. Now, in the Beacon there is still like a military force in it, and there is this huge typhoon of zombies headed for the Beacon. Pretty much the largest horde of zombies you've ever seen, because again, China is a very, very populated place, so it would mean lots of zombies. So the Beacon has a fuckload of walkers coming for it, and we see the Beacon pretty much take survivors that kind of just want to be on their own. They basically make them slaves and try to protect the Beacon. Now, while this is going on, the main character of the book finds this village with people he knew from before the apocalypse, and he's trying to keep this village a secret, because if the Beacon finds out about this, you know, they will be taken against their will. So that's basically what the story of Typhoon is about. It's a great story, definitely read it. Fantastic book. I actually did a review on it a few months back. Next up is the Telltale games. Now, the Telltale games are probably the most famous part of the comic universe, even more than the comics themselves. But the Telltale games tell the story of a character called Clementine. Now, the first Walking Dead game by Telltale was called The Walking Dead Season 1. It was a 5-episode game, and it came out in 2012. Also, I might have forgot to say, but The Walking Dead Typhoon came out in 2019. Telltale's The Walking Dead, however, came out in 2012. The first Telltale Walking Dead game came out, Season 1 came out in 2012. In this story, we see a character known as Lee Everett, a man who was heading to prison because of a murder he committed. Fun fact, the prison he was actually going to is the same one from the comic books. But anyway, while on his way to prison is when the walkers first come about, and he's basically let out as a free man because of the zombies, so he kind of has like a second chance at life, and he finds this little girl called Clementine, and because her parents are no longer around, because they, before the apocalypse, went to another part of Georgia, which is where the game takes place, and left her with a babysitter, but of course they never made it back because of the apocalypse. So Lee takes care of this little girl Clementine and tries to prepare her for the world. Now, the next game Telltale made was called 400 Days. It was a DLC episode for Season 1 and was released in 2013. It was just one episode they did. This tells the story of 6 survivors and shows little snippets of their life post-apocalypse and some of the stuff they do. Now, one of the choices in this game is that depending on the choices you make throughout 400 days, at the end of the game they will either decide to stay at a camp or decide to go to this community. Now, one of the characters decides to go to the community no matter what. The other character you play as is the one that kind of tries to convince them to come to this community, so obviously that character is going to go to the community. Now, those 2 characters appear in the second season no matter what. However, the other characters can appear in season 2 depending on your choices. Now, season 2 was released in 2013, which is when the first episode came out, and the season finished up around sometime in 2014. Now, the second season was like the first season, where it had 5 episodes and continued the story of Clementine, where she is now a bit older. She's a bit more, used to life after the apocalypse, and we are seeing her meet new people and try to survive in the world. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is actually a trailer Telltale did for The Walking Dead Season 2. Now, when The Walking Dead Season 2 Episode 5, which was the finale, was coming out, they did this trailer, and in this trailer there was this exclusive scene of Clementine pre-apocalypse. So this scene would take place before Season 1. It shows Clementine with her babysitter, and her parents are like calling Clementine, saying like they'll be home soon, and you just see Clementine before the apocalypse. So it's a really good scene, and if you want to find that scene, just look up the Season 2 Episode 5 trailer, and it should be there. It's at the end of the trailer. Now, the next thing Telltale did was The Walking Dead Michonne. It was called The Walking Dead Michonne, a Telltale miniseries. I think that's the official title for it, but I'll show you the title anyway on screen. But this was released in 2016, and it was only 3 episodes. Again, it was only a miniseries, and it tells the story of what Michonne was doing at a certain point of the comics. Now, what I mean by this is, at some point in the comics of The Walking Dead, there was a big war, and after the war, there was a few-year time skip. And during this time skip, Michonne left the group and went off on a boat, and this game explains what she was doing during that time. Now, the next game they did, and if I haven't said this already, the Michonne game came out in 2016. So the next game Telltale made was The Walking Dead: A New Frontier, also known as The Walking Dead Season 3. It, like Season 1 and 2, was 5 episodes and was released between 2016 and 2017. Now, this game takes a bit of a different approach. Instead of being focused on Clementine, it is focused on the Garcia family, and you play for most of the game as a character known as Javier Garcia. We see this guy who is taking care of his brother's wife and his niece and nephew, and we see him meet up with characters like Clementine, and we see him trying to protect his family and coming across this community called The New Frontier. Now, in this storyline, we have, like, one of the big things about this storyline is with Clementine's story. Now, in the second Walking Dead Telltale game, Season 2, there was this character that gave birth to a child. Now, Clementine has pretty much become the carer for that child, and after the events of Season 2, before the events of Season 3, the child and Clementine got separated, and Clementine pretty much assumed that the child, known as AJ, was dead. Now, in the game, she does find out that the child is still alive, and her mission is basically to find out where AJ is and get him back. Now, the next game Telltale made was The Walking Dead: The Final Season, also known as The Walking Dead Season 4. This time, it was only 4 episodes, and it was released between 2018 and 2019. This concludes the story of Clementine, along with the person she's taking care of, the child known as AJ, and this game almost didn't even get finished because after episode 2 came out, Telltale, the company that made these games, shut down, but Skybound Games stepped up and finished the game, so we did get to see Clementine and AJ's story conclude. Now, in this game, we have Clementine and AJ finding a school run by children because all the teachers thought, instead of taking care of these kids, let's just fuck off and, leave all these kids to die. So we see Clementine and AJ find this school. It's run by kids, and they join the school, and they have to defend the school from this group known as the Delta. Now, that's pretty much all I will say about this without getting into too much spoilers. Now, the final thing is Skydance related stuff. Now, Skydance, back in 2019, made this podcast, which was a 10-episode podcast called The Supernatural Skeptic's Guide to New Orleans. It followed a character called Sarah Bennett, and who is like a radio host in New Orleans who basically tries to prove that, you know, the supernatural stuff isn't real. Like, she tries to bring logic to it, and while she is pretty much like doing a series about this place called the LaRouche House, which has a history of violent murders, while she is investigating this house, the apocalypse begins, and she has to now deal with this new life in the apocalypse. And we follow her story where she is broadcasting to other people, trying to get her message out there, and trying to, you know, try to also find out the mystery behind the LaRouche house. Now, again, I'm trying to avoid spoilers, so I'll just leave it at that. This podcast was also a prequel to the game Skydance came out with, called The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners. The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners came out in 2020 and is a VR game where you play as the tourist, a guy or a girl depending on how you want the character to be, because you are in control of the skin color and the gender of this character. So you play as the tourist, a character coming to New Orleans because they've heard about a place called the Reserve, a place that has pretty much all the supplies you could ever ask for. Now, while the tourist is in New Orleans, there's other people trying to fight for this reserve. There are two factions called the Tower and the Reclaimed, and they are basically at war with each other, and you're pretty much in the middle of this war trying to get to the reserve before they do. Now, that is pretty much everything in the comic universe. Now, there are two other things I want to mention that could possibly be considered canon. However, it's not really confirmed. First of all, when The Walking Dead Season 4 Telltale game was coming out, they did a teaser trailer that showed Clementine and AJ before they got to the school. Now, in this storyline, in this trailer, Clementine asked AJ, "What would you do if I got bit?" Now, in the game itself, Clementine mentions, you know, having a discussion like this with AJ. So that could mean that that trailer is in fact canon. But again, I'm just omitting it just in case it isn't, because again, it has not been confirmed as canon. The next thing is a story. Now, this one is a bit more spoilery, so I'm just going to try to tiptoe around it, but this has spoilers for the final season of the Telltale game, so listen to this part with caution because it might be spoilery. In this, it's basically written as a letter. It's called How I Saved Clem by AJ. And it's basically telling you how AJ managed to save Clementine when Clementine was in a very bad situation. Now, again, I don't know if this is definitely canon. Now, this is basically because of Clementine surviving something that looked very, you know, dire. They of course had to explain how AJ managed to save Clementine, so this was kind of like an answer to that, so you could say that is canon. However, it talks about a character getting their arm cut off. Now, here's the thing with that, is that this character only gets their arm cut off depending on your choices, so, you know, basically confirming that this character gets their arm cut off, it kind of negates the people that didn't have this character's arm cut off. So I don't know if you can really consider it canon, because the thing with Telltale's The Walking Dead is any storyline is considered canon, it's just what's your canon. But yeah, that is everything in the comic universe of The Walking Dead, everything that's been confirmed anyway. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for part 2 where I will talk about everything in the TV universe. Thank you guys for watching, and goodbye.